About 10 years ago, I wrote my first book, and I assumed once I was finished, I'd get an agent, I'd get a publishing deal, and it would all be really, really, really easy. It didn't work out that way. 10 years later, I did get an agent, I did get a publishing deal, but the journey was difficult. It was full of twists and disappointments and rejections. I'm Michelle Adams. I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for getting an agent. So let's just put it out there. Getting an agent is really, really hard. It's not a lie when people say it's difficult, that they're the gatekeepers. They are. It feels a bit like you're just swimming blindly in this ocean. You don't know where you're going, you don't know what you're doing, you're sending out submissions, you're writing books. It's not like you can write a book in a month and say, okay, well, I'll send this one out, and if this one doesn't work, I'll write another one. It might take you a year or even 2 years or even 5 years of your life to write that book that you want to send out to an agent. So it's really good if you can do certain things that make it more likely that you are able to secure an agent with the book that you write. It's not a conspiracy. The agents want to find you. Agents are looking for writers to represent. They're looking for writers who write great books. Let's get on with what I think are some of the most important things to help you get there. Number 1, write a really good book. Whilst it sounds really obvious to write a really good book, it's not necessarily very easy to know whether you've done it. In order to know that you have written a book that's going to be likely to get picked up by an agent, you have to have a lot of insight into your own writing. And when you've been spending a year, 2 years, however many years of your life writing that book, it's really difficult to stand back and know that that book isn't good enough, or whether it is good enough even. Writers, we know, are often plagued by a lot of self-doubts, and I'm no different. I've just written my 3rd book, and I sent it off to my agent, and I felt no less nervous today when I sent it off than I did when I was submitting 10 years ago trying to find an agent. Make sure you're a really avid reader. If you can have a really, really good handle and a real good grip on what's selling at the moment, it's a lot easier to look at your own work as long as you can be constructive about what you've done and know that, yeah, this book that I've written now, it stands up against what's selling and what agents are obviously picking up. If you are sure you have written the best book you can and it stands up against the books that are currently being published in your genre, you are ready for tip number 2. Follow the agent's advice. You would be surprised how many people don't. If your agent, or if your preferred agent that you are trying to submit to, wants your book to be submitted in font 50, triple spaced, just do it. Like, why would you not do that? The agents have all got websites, and most of them list a huge amount of advice in bullet point form. Number 1, double space it. 2, send it in size 12 font. 3, make sure you send it by email and not send it by post. So don't do what I did in the beginning and bind it in red string and think that it's going to look fancy and that someone will go, oh, she made an effort. Do what they ask. It's not helpful to not do that. It's not helpful to send it by post if they're only working online. I think that this point is not only important because that's their preference, it's important because what you're doing is showing I can follow pretty simple instructions. But if you can't follow the simplest of instructions at the beginning, all you're doing is presenting yourself as someone that is not very competent. You're making it harder for them to trust in you. And that really leads on to tip number 3. Get organised. When you start the submission process, it is just exhausting. I made the decision to submit with my latest book, which is My Sister, and it was the first book that got me agent representation. I had an Excel spreadsheet. I had all of my agents listed on there. I had submission dates, the number of weeks that I was supposed to wait. I had whether they would be happy for me to give them a nudge if I had an interest from another agent or a full manuscript request. Finding an agent is not just about sending out your manuscript to 1 or 2. Obviously, there are people that do that. There are people that pick an agent and say, that's the only agent I want, and they send it off and you're a perfect match and they take your manuscript in a flash. That wasn't my story. It took, I don't know how many it was. The 3rd time I did my submissions was when I got an agent. I think I probably had 100 agents on the list, which is really not the way to do it. I should have been way more selective, but I was like a lot of writers. I didn't listen to any advice. I didn't say, okay, well, you know, I'll only submit to these 4 agents because these are the people that will represent this kind of work. I had a really small pool of agents that I wanted, and I was really lucky that I got one of those agents. But at the same time, I would have been prepared to apply anywhere and everywhere because I really, really wanted a publishing deal. So I had this whole list on Excel. You really, really don't want an agent to request a full manuscript and you miss it, or you really, really don't want to submit to an agent for a second time for the same manuscript. It's really, really hard to keep track of different submissions. A lot of them want you to submit one at a time. That's very difficult. Agents sometimes take 3-4 months to get back to you. I had a publishing deal, and I was working on the edits for my book, and I was still receiving emails from a couple of agents saying, actually, we're not going to represent you. Whatever it takes for you to be organised, be it a whiteboard, be it an Excel spreadsheet like I had, be it a diary, be it your email, just make sure that you're on top of things. You need to be super professional. You need to consider every submission that you make to be like a job application, because that agent, like what I was saying earlier, that agent is looking to you to not only provide excellent work that they can sell to publishers, but actually keep their business afloat. You're the people that provide the content as the writers for the agents to sell. So you need to present yourself in your covering letter, not as their best buddy, not as their mate that they're going to meet down the pub. You are a potential client, you're a potential collaborator, a content provider. It's not just about selling the book, it's about selling yourself. The agent needs to know that they can represent you. The agent needs to know that they can work with you. They need to rely on you to represent their firm, just in the same way that you're relying on them to represent you. And tip number 5 is probably the most important out of everything I've said. And it's really to be relentless. Chase down everything and don't give up. You'll be really, really hard pushed to find writers who haven't had a rejection slip ever in their life. The first time I did it, I think I got 20 rejection slips. I think I probably sent out 20 manuscripts. But for me, I had given up about getting an agent. I didn't even think that it was going to be possible, and I'd stopped bothering. But it didn't mean that my dream to be a traditionally published writer had gone away. So you just need to keep in mind what you're trying to achieve. It took having a conversation for me with another writer who was just starting her agent submissions process for the first time, and I kind of questioned, why am I not doing that? Be relentless. Make sure that you chase your dream to get an agent and do everything that is necessary in order to get there. If you want to know anything about my publishing journey, if you want to know anything more about getting an agent, how I did it, if you want to see my agent's letter, just let me know. And if you want to know what I'm doing at the moment as a writer, you can follow me on my blog. You can find links down in the description. If you want to follow me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, you will be able to find all of the information there. I talk about my writing process, about my life, about anything that might be remotely writing related. See you next time.